Hello and welcome on into my studio. My name is Danielle Turner Lawrence. I'm with Pine Lake Pottery and today we are going to make a really cool tray. It is going to use a number of materials including underglaze transfers. So let's go ahead and get started and I will show you all the tools and materials. So first things first, we need clay. I use Laguna's B-Mix 5. I find that it is easy for hand building, wheel throwing, kind of an all-purpose clay. It's also what's close to me, and so I don't have to pay for freight or shipping and things like that. I can go pick it up. So I find that this works really great. So that's my clay that I'm going to use. We will obviously need a wire cutter to cut that clay off. And then we need tools and materials to actually make the tray that we're going to use. So first and foremost, I'm going to show you the cutter I'm going to use. So this is a really large cutter. It is made by DelaDesignGifts.com. You can get them. And what's really nice about these cutters is one, you can replicate your trays and they can all look the same. But two, it cuts really a large amount of clay and it matches the GR Pottery Forms that I can get here in the United States. So these are MDF forms. They work really well to make the trays, and you can just see here that it perfectly sort of matches this tray here, or this GR Pottery Form here. So we need a GR Pottery Form, we need our cutter, and then a number of other smaller tools that we need. We need some sort of silicone rib to smooth our clay. We need a needle tool, a silicone rubber tip tool that kind of helps smooth the edges. We need something to slip and score with. This is the GR Pottery Form foot cutter. You can literally use a corn cob holder if you want and just sort of separate the prongs, but I actually have one that's made by GR Pottery Forms. I'll need a paintbrush along with some slip to be able to attach the foot, and then also a sponge that is just moist. And then lastly, a piece of foam. A lot of my large trays are made as a press tray. I find that it's just nice to be able to line everything up. And so this is upholstery foam or pillow foam. You can get it at your local craft store. I use one side for my light clay and then the other side for my dark clay, just so that I don't mix those. And then lastly, an underglaze tissue transfer. Now, these are can be a little bit tricky to work with, but I'm going to show you some different things that you can do to really improve your results. This one in particular is from, I believe, Plum Island Transfer. You can see here it's a bunch of kind of flowers in a row, and we're going to put that right in the middle of our of our tray. All right, so those are the tools and materials that you need. We are going to go ahead and roll out a slab of clay. I have a slab roller. I'm going to turn my camera around so that you can actually see me roll out my slab of clay. This is a pretty large tray, so you definitely want to get a hefty amount of clay rolled out, especially to make sure that the foot ring, which we'll talk about more, of your tray has plenty of plenty of clay to be able to do that as well. So let me move some of this stuff off of my work surface and then we will go ahead and get started. So I actually already cut my chunk off here because I started doing this and forgot that I should be filming. So I think I can get this off. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I do need to cut it again. Okay, so cut off a pretty big chunk of clay. Okay, there we go. Just kind of tricky. All right, let's put this away. My basement is very dry, so I always make sure anything that I'm going to leave for any period of time gets closed back up. So close this up. Put this behind me here. All right. So let's go ahead. I'm going to take my chunk of clay and I'm actually going to go over to my slab roller. I'll take you along with me. All right, so you get to see the rest of my studio. It's a little bit messy here. I'm going to go ahead and use my slab roller to roll out my clay. I have a North Star slab roller. All right, so I have my really large slab. It's really big. And first and foremost, I just make sure that I can get my tray out of this. So this looks plenty big. What we're gonna do first is go ahead and smooth. I do this one on this side, and then we'll flip it onto a board. And sometimes what I'll do, especially when I have a slab this big, is I'll go ahead and smooth this side, but because I don't have a board that will hold this length of clay, I'll actually cut out a rough estimate of my tray so that I don't have to kind of move the whole piece. You know, clay has memory, and that memory sticks around, and you will see it later on when your finished product comes out of the kiln. So the more you can make sure your slab stays straight, flat, I should say, the better off you will be. All right, so I'm gonna just put this on here and give myself kind of a rough estimate of what that looks like. I'm gonna take my needle tool and I'm literally just going to kind of cut out that piece. So I can kind of deal with this piece later, which I'm gonna actually just set off to the side here. And then we'll deal with this piece now. So that way I can flip this onto a work surface or onto my work surface. So I'm gonna grab a board here. These are actually made by GR Pottery Forms as well. They're really nice work boards to have. I also work on a number of other boards. Actually, I could probably do a video just on kind of work boards alone, but also we'll use sometimes drywall as my work board. It's really nice because it kind of lets the clay dry evenly. All right, so just smoothing that one more time. I'm gonna flip it over to the other side and we're gonna smooth that out. Okay, when you smooth, I think this is one of those things that actually is maybe a little harder than it looks, and definitely practice makes perfect. You want to use your silicone rib. You want to hold it at about a 45-degree angle, and then you want to pull it towards you. Okay, only put pressure in one direction, that I'm actually pulling kind of away from the clay. And you should see all of your texture from that canvas sort of disappear. Okay, all right, so that's looking pretty smooth. Again, this doesn't just get rid of the canvas texture, it really compresses and aligns your clay. All right, so I'm gonna actually move this piece of canvas because I don't find it to be very easy to work on. All right, so the first thing I actually do is I cut my tray out, okay? So a lot of people can do this in a lot of different ways. I could drape it over that and then cut the tray, but I really find that cutting the tray first makes it a lot easier to add the underglaze transfer. So I'm gonna make sure that's aligned on there, and then I'm gonna kind of use pressure in opposite directions because this cutter is gonna flex and you don't want it to sort of miscut the clay. I'm gonna just go around and make sure that that is kind of pressed down as much as I can in all directions. And then rather than just pick this up, I'm actually going to pull the clay around it. Again, this really allows you to keep that piece of clay flat on your board and not cause any warping. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and use this later. And actually, I think realistically, just so you know, I'm gonna go ahead and actually cover up my slab here that's on the table as well with some plastic. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull this off. Again, kind of making sure that that clay stays straight. Put that aside. All right, so the first thing I do is there's oftentimes just a little bit of extra clay that's been left behind by the cutter. And I'm going to go around with my needle tool and I'm just going to get all of those little pieces off. And then I go ahead and take my sponge. This is just barely moist, okay? You really don't want to add a lot of water to your clay. And I'm just smoothing those edges. Almost always I go back after I make my tray and do some more smoothing. And sometimes I will even use another silicone rib that makes kind of a more rounded edge. All right, so I'm gonna flip this. So now we are gonna take our underglaze transfer here. Now, what's important about this is because you're gonna be putting this entire thing on there, is I need to cut off this little extra underglaze transfer that is actually kind of the name of, probably the name of the company, and also these frame lines that are on it, because I don't want those on my tray. Okay. All right, so I just take that away. All right. So I want to get this in the middle. I mean, thankfully this kind of goes, spans the entirety of the tray. So I can really just kind of eyeball where that lines up. All right, that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and press from the middle and out. The middle and out. And if you put, if you press it down right away and it folds, you can lift it up. But once it's kind of started getting a little bit moist, you really have to leave it. Now I'm going to use my red rubber rib, my silicone rib, and I'm going to start really kind of burnishing and smoothing this in the clay. Okay. I really don't like to use a lot of water. I find that it smears my underglaze transfers, and these tissue transfers are really quite forgiving. If you get small wrinkles in the clay, small wrinkles in the tissue transfer, by smoothing it, it really takes them out, even if it kind of doubles up on your, even if you see that sort of, like distort the pattern, it almost always works itself out. Okay, looks like I put a little bit of that tissue transfer into my clay, so I'm actually going to work to get that out. And the reason is well, I actually will probably glaze this blue. I just want to make sure I'm not dyeing my clay. So in this case, I'm actually going to use a little bit of water on just the clay part to get that out. And, I guess by doing this, I give myself a little bit of time to actually let this tissue transfer actually set up. Now what you're going to notice is you're going to start to see the tissue transfer go from, I don't know if you can see this here, go from kind of a really, sort of not crisp pattern to a very crisp pattern, okay? And that is just water that is absorbing into the tissue transfer and allowing the actual underglaze to come off and set into the clay. Okay. Now, occasionally I will put a damp sponge and do one of these, just to make sure that there's really a good amount of moisture. But this is really not damp, or excuse me, really not super wet. And so you just got to be really careful that you are not adding too much moisture. And I always spend a little extra time just really making sure those edges are in fact really pressed down. Okay, and sometimes I do a little peek. Let's do a little peek. And I think I could use a little bit more. All right. And I do this slowly, not because if you did it fast, it wouldn't work well, but because if I see an area that doesn't have the transfer of the design, I can actually lay the transfer back down if I'm not too far away from having pulled off that specific area. All right. All right, that looks beautiful. All right, let me move this out of the way. Those are one-time use only. I'm also gonna move this out of the way. I actually, for all of my scraps, I actually put them in my slip jar. So all of these little guys go just right in there so I don't have to deal with them. Okay, so there's a little bit of clay crumbs there. All right, so the first thing I do is I'm gonna release my clay because I've pressed it down, transfer it onto this pillow upholstery foam, if you will. All right, so I'm gonna put this here, and this one barely fits on here. This is obviously a very large tray, which I think is really nice to be able to make. All right, I'm gonna put this here for a moment. All right, so I am going to put this GR Pottery Form down. Now, some people will put a little bit of cornstarch actually on the transfer. You can do that if you're worried about it smearing. I'm pretty careful to make sure that I'm not like shifting this around and that I'm actually picking it up and moving it so that the transfer itself doesn't smear, okay? All right, and you really wanna make sure that you are centered. There's nothing more frustrating than making a giant tray and then finding out later that you wished that your clay was more centered. And not only centered side to side, but also centered here. Like, for instance, I think I need to pick up and move just a little bit more, right? We wanna kind of make sure that those look, and I think I still need to go a little bit more that way. Looks pretty good. Again, I sort of make sure that this all looks even. All right. So then the next thing I do is I'm actually gonna push down, okay? Sometimes I will actually get like a stool to push down, or I will even pull this off onto a table that is below me so that I can like look above it and make sure that I feel like it's in line. Now, when I push this down, the sides are gonna pop up higher. That's fine that the sides are gonna pop up higher, but when you flip it over, you need to make sure you have something to stack it on. So I oftentimes just grab the other forms that sort of, you know, go with this set and actually push, put them there. So I'm not gonna use those to kind of push through, but I'm gonna put those on so that the edges don't get damaged when I flip it over. So, okay, let's go ahead and just press the tray. So first I'm gonna push down, and I usually try to do like 3 or 4 times. And if it's a really big tray, I'll focus on one edge and then I'll focus on the other edge, kind of get that like that. Okay, so the tray has been popped up. Now, obviously it's just not exactly perfect where I want it, but we're gonna get that way when we flip it over. So I'm gonna put these on here. I'm gonna go ahead and grab that tray back, put it on here, and then I'm gonna flip the whole thing over, okay? All right, so that moved a little bit, but that's not really a big deal because it was just the underside. It's just on those trays. You could always flip it without it. So I am going to take my sponge and I'm literally just going to be smoothing so that I can get kind of the exact shape that I want. Bring the other clay back over so we can make our foot. All right, so I'm gonna move that to here. And we don't need this piece of foam anymore, so I'm gonna put that down there. And let's go ahead and pull this piece of clay back over. And that's my scraps to make the foot ring. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this. And how I'm gonna decide how I cut it is really based on kind of the length of that form. You know, I need to have 4 long sections. So I'm going to actually cut it here so that, put this piece aside so that it can work with just this long strip, and I'm going to get it off this plastic. All right, so this is my foot maker. The bottom piece, again, I told you doesn't really need to be smooth because it's attached to the tray. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting my foot. You just basically hold this against the board, and I'm going to drag this through pretty evenly, trying to keep this fairly straight. You need a clay knife. So you could use your needle tool to do this, certainly, but it's kind of nice to have a clay knife. So I'm going to add that to what you need to be able to do this project. So first thing I'm going to do is just kind of eyeball how much of this we need, and use my clay knife and just sort of cut the pieces. This one actually works even for right here. And then we will use a piece from this over here. Now, I also like to do an inner foot. And so I'm going to just mark that out as well. Because this is such a big tray, you want to make sure that you don't have slumping. And the way that you prevent slumping is by having that support there. So I'm going to just go ahead and grab another piece of this. And I'm just, you know, it's just a rough eyeball. I want to have kind of all of the pieces that I need ready to go. All right, so we've got our pieces that we need. Now I'm likely to kind of just shore them up a little bit. You know, there's no reason to have kind of all these extra pieces hanging off here, especially for stuff like this. It'll just make it a mess when you start using slip and such. Okay, so I'm going to put that over here, again, to keep it moist. All right, so I'm going to just start pulling these off so that I kind of know where they go. All right, so the first thing I do to actually attach the feet is I grab something to be able to score with, and I just go around and I mark this up, okay? And I'm marking the edge, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and the reason it doesn't have to be perfect is because it's going to get covered, and it's also going to get smoothed. So you don't need to be perfect. And a lot can kind of get fixed later on too. So I'm going to just do the outer first because I find that the outer foot ring helps to decide the space for my inner foot ring. And then I'm going to go ahead and score, rough up the edges of each of the pieces for my foot ring. And I'm again just going to leave those inner pieces alone for a second. All right, and then I'm going to grab my slip. This is, you know, just some clay pieces and some water. You can also use magic water. I certainly do that as well. I tend to like just kind of traditional slip for trays. But magic water, I have a video on magic water as well. And you can check that out because it works really well, especially if you're using a clay that you don't want to have like an entire jar of slip for. Magic water will allow you to join it without making kind of that slip. Okay, so we're gonna put a generous amount of slip on each of our foot pieces here. Okay. All right. So as soon as you have that, you are going to start attaching. So I will go ahead and attach this one first. And I really like to do a foot ring that follows the edge of the tray. And I will go ahead and set this down, and I will oftentimes kind of adjust where it's at. And then I will get my sponge. Again, it's not even, I didn't even re-moisten it from when we did the Underglaze transfer. And I use it almost like a taco, and I pull through to the end, okay? And I'm not only like aligning it so that it's in, you know, exactly where I want it, I'm also pressing down and pulling a little bit and stretching that clay out a little bit. And sometimes I will even stand at this end of the table just to make sure I really have kind of where I want it, and I can see all the different sort of profiles and sides of that. Okay, so I do that one. I don't then go do the next long one. I actually work around that one because I want to make sure that I get kind of what I call a mitered corner. Okay, so same thing, get this sort of situated there. You're obviously not going to be able to press down right here, but you want to get the foot ring as situated as possible because it's going to give you the best approximation of where to cut it. Okay, so, and I go all the way to this end because this will be the one that's attached. Okay, then I'm going to take my clay knife. I'm going to come and right at the corner, I am going to find where those two meet, and that's exactly where I'm going to cut through both of the foot pieces. I am not, however, going to cut through the tray. Okay, so I pull those away. I don't bother to worry about slipping and scoring between those. Now you're like, oh, that looks a little bit far away. But by the time you sort of adjust this one a little bit and adjust that, they're awfully close. And then you take and you are stretching this piece here. See if I can kind of show you better this way, into that piece there. And then I will oftentimes just go in and really make sure that those two are attached. Sometimes, you know, you have to fiddle with it a little bit, especially this inner corner. But if you do it now, you know, you have all this kind of room to be able to put your hand in there, especially if your tray is smaller. And really kind of just marry those two together, okay? So then again, I sort of make sure that that one is as stretched as possible. Come back here and make sure we've got enough stretching going on here. And then I'll go ahead and I usually will kind of just work around in a circle. So I'm going to add this one on here. All right, so before I move on to the inner foot ring, I'm going to take my silicone shaper and I'm literally just going to go through and really kind of press on that edge. Okay, all right, so now we just got to do our inner foot ring and we are set. So I'm going to kind of lay the inner foot ring out. This is a little bit different than I do the other side because there's not an edge. And so you want to make sure that you have exactly kind of what you want in terms of the shape of that foot ring. So again, I want to just curve that a little bit. And then I'm going to curve this side a little bit too. And what I'm really checking here is to make sure that the distances look right in terms of where I put my foot ring. So like that. It's the same as about there, and then these are about the same on both sides. So then I'm actually going to take my silicone and I'm just going to kind of draw out the inside of that. So I have kind of just an idea of where to slip and score. make sure that, we've done a good job of making sure the moisture in our clay really is even. So you could theoretically not slip and score. I have in the past had situations where my foot ring has come off, so I do slip and score, but technically because these are really the same moisture and you're going to leave this covered for a period of time, you can sometimes get away without it. All right, so again, I'm going to get one of these down. And I'm pushing down, I'm pressing across, and you can sometimes actually see that clay move. Okay, I'm going to use my sponge and kind of clean up the edges while I have the space in there. And then I'm going to do this one next. I'm going to go ahead and again, this is tough when they're tiny, right? But you just want to make sure that you have a good idea that this is actually adhered down. And then I usually come in from this way because it's too far away. And here I'm really trying to line up where that, that miter joint is. Sometimes be a little bit off. Same sort of thing. I'm going to use my silicone shaper all the way around, really sort of pressing on that join. I have a little maker's mark that I use. I oftentimes will just put it on the foot ring since I know it won't get filled in with glaze. So we'll go ahead and put that on there. See that there? All right, so that's really it for the tray. Now we have to let it dry. So I will leave this uncovered probably for probably only about an hour or two in my basement. I live in Michigan. It is winter, it is dry down here. And so it just doesn't take a lot of time. If you're in other parts of the country or world, certainly it can take you longer, but you really want the tray to be able to hold its own shape when you flip it out. So we're gonna let this dry and then we'll be back to show you how to flip it out and we'll talk a little bit about glazing. All right, so this has set up after a couple hours. It really is ready to flip out, so we can kind of adjust it. So I'm gonna go ahead and put board on the back here and go ahead and just flip. And it looks like when I flipped it out the first time, caused a couple little bumps here, but we're gonna fix those up. Shouldn't be a problem. Might have to spend a little time with that one there. Looks like it happened here too. All right, so just gonna kind of curve this how I want it to be, and once we get it out of here, then we can do a little bit more refining. All right, looks good. All right, I will refine it a little bit more later, but this looks really nice. Nice big tray, beautiful. All right, so I will let this dry and then likely I will put a Celadon on top, likely a light blue Celadon just to complement what's there, but I'll know more once I actually get it out of the kiln. So hope you found this helpful. I think making big trays can be pretty tough, especially if there is concern for warping. All right, so I will put some weight bags on this, to weigh it down to make sure that it doesn't warp, get it into a bisque kiln, and then likely we'll put a light blue celadon glaze, something that is transparent on it. And so look forward to seeing this come out of the kiln. So hope this was helpful. Thanks for joining. Check out my other videos, and we'll see you next time.